Hey, this is Michelle, and you're listening to Words with Michelle, the podcast, a show where I sit down and have conversations with influencers on a range of topics, anything from natural hair, employment, discrimination, food, relationships, and everything in between. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. If you want to send me an email, hit me up at michelle@wordsmichelle.com. Thanks for tuning into the latest episode of Words with Michelle, the podcast. Are you like me and feel at times that you are swimming in an overwhelming amount of stress? Maybe it's stress at work, stress at home, or even stress in your relationships. Do you feel like stress is taking over your life and possibly robbing you of joy? I feel the same way. Over the past 4 years, I've dealt with an insurmountable amount of stress. And yes, it's taken a toll on me. So I really wanted to know how to deal with the stress in my life. So I decided to dedicate an entire show on the subject. No, not just for me, but for anyone out there that needs help dealing with life's stresses. I spoke with Trudy Stone, a food nutritionist and wellness expert. She spoke about controlling and managing your stress through food and nutrition. Trudy also shares how changing your perception about stress can change the way you deal with it. But before I get into the show, I want to let you know that the show was sponsored by Epidemic Consulting Services. If you're an entrepreneur or micro-entrepreneur in need of leveling up your business, Epidemic Consulting can walk you through while teaching you the process of starting or expanding a business with their unique business consulting model. Epigram specializes in product identification, business plans, financial analysis, operations, and marketing. Ready to start or fine-tune your business? Contact Karen at info@epigramconsulting.com. Now back to the show. As I was saying, stress is everywhere around us. It's in the news, the rising cost of living. We're repeatedly inundated with negativity. Trudy breaks down how our bodies are affected by stress. And I'll let you in on a little secret. It ain't good. In the conversation, I asked Trudy if we're living in a super stressful time, like more stressful than ever, because we've been living through a pandemic, high levels of crime, rising cost of food, rising cost of everything. But Trudy assured me that although there is a lot going on at the present time, there will always be stress in our lives. So we need effective tools that will enable us to manage stress, because no one is immune from it. One way to do it is through the food we put in our bodies. Please note this is not the only way to manage stress. There are other ways, but for today's episode, we focus on food and nutrition. So if you're looking for ways to manage stress and live a happier life, please listen to the episode. I asked Trudy to tell us about herself and why she entered the stress management space.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks so much for having me. So my name is Trudy Stone. I'm a certified culinary nutritionist. I'm a speaker. I'm an author, podcast host, and founder of Food Swap Foodie. So my mission really is to illuminate the life-changing power of nutrition for improving mood, alleviating stress, and just building resilience through nutrition.
So how'd you get into stress management then? How did you get into this?
Well, it was a long and winding road.
I can
So
imagine.
I first got into nutrition with weight loss, and that was because that was my own personal journey and transformation. So years ago, like most brides, after I got engaged, I wanted to lose weight. And I tried a lot of different diets before. I kept losing it, gaining it back, losing it, gaining it back. But when I got engaged and before I got married, I said, you know what? If I'm going to lose weight this time, like I want this to be it. Like I want to lose weight once and for all, and I want to keep it off. So I
Mhm.
started doing a lot of study, looking at a lot of different like research studies, like Harvard research studies, and looking at different experts in the field. I'm a bit of a research nerd. And I started applying what I was learning on myself, and I ended up losing 30 pounds. But along the way, yeah, so 30 pounds, which is awesome. I didn't expect that because really I wanted to lose maybe about like 15 to 20, but I ended up losing 30, which was phenomenal. Even my dressmaker, she was
That's
like,
a lot of weight. You were able to,
it
wow.
was, yeah. But it just became like easier and easier just because I really started to enjoy the process of taking care of myself. And I think that's what made it different that time more than any other time. And I remember even when I was going for fittings for my dress, the seamstress was like, okay, Trudy, don't lose any more weight now because I have to keep taking in this dress. And I was like, okay, I can't promise it because at that point it was just kind of coming off, right?
Mhm.
But I really at that time learned the power of the language that we use with ourselves when it comes to making any sort of changes in our life. So whether you're losing weight, whether you're trying to eat healthier, I really believe that your mindset is the foundation for any sort of change in your life. And I
Yeah.
believe that was the one thing that made all the difference. And while I was going through that weight loss journey, I was also really stressed as well because I was planning my wedding single handedly. I was volunteering for like one of like the largest charity organizations in Canada. I was volunteering for the Canadian Cancer Society on their Relay for Life. I don't know if you heard of this event, but Relay for Life. I was working corporate at that time, and literally overnight, the size of my team that I was supporting had doubled. There was multiple time zones. I was going to school part time, so there was a lot going on, and I was carrying a lot of stress.
Wow.
And I really realized the importance as well at that time of just getting my stress levels in check and just starting to adopt some sort of stress management techniques because I was also learning about the detrimental effects. And I know we're going to talk about this in a minute, the detrimental effects of stress on our health, and specifically if you're trying to lose weight. And so when I left my corporate job and I started counseling women one on one, when I did the client intake form, one of the questions I asked them was on a scale of 1 to 10, like how high are stress levels? Like one being like I'm walking on sunshine and 10 being someone please call 911.
Hmm.
And the average answer was somewhere around a 7 or an 8. And that's really like when the light bulb came on. And I was like, okay, I think I'm going to start pivoting my practice towards stress management because a lot of women don't really understand the detrimental effects that stress has on their body, whether you're trying to lose weight or just living your daily life. They just didn't understand those detrimental effects and how stress affects the body. And knowing all the different ways that stress affects the body, that's also why I developed a 4-step rise system, I call it, that I use with my clients and speaking with at different corporations on how to help them to rise above stress.
Wow. Actually, let's
Yes, it
get.
was a long road.
Oh no, no, it makes sense. I want to know. Okay, so what are the effects that stress has on the body? Then let's go into that because you were talking about that, and I guess I know firsthand because I remember when I worked in the office when I felt it. I felt my stress, like I felt it right in my stomach. I felt it in my core.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
So.
absolutely, Michelle, for sure. So when your body decides that you're in danger, it switches out of what's called like a thrive state and it puts you in a stress state. So when you go into the stress state, there's two biological systems that are activated. So the first one is called the autonomic nervous system. And this is the one that just controls like all of the processes in your body that you don't think about. So like breathing and digesting. So when you talked earlier about getting that knot, like those knots and that tightness in your stomach and your chest, like that's a perfect example of stress at work because it affects your digestion. So you
Mm,
might experience things like diarrhea or even, constipation. So this autonomic nervous system, it has two branches. It's the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system. So you can kind of picture it like being in a car, and the sympathetic system is like when you're pushing the gas, and the
mhm,
parasympathetic system is when you're pushing the brake, right? But a
mhm.
lot of us are just pushing that gas and we're not really activating the brake, right? So
Okay.
when the body receives that information that we're in danger, the sympathetic branch, so that gas, right, it releases the hormones adrenaline and non-adrenaline. So this sends a signal to the rest of your body that, it needs to start changing its function. So for example, like increasing your heart rate. And it does that so more blood and oxygen are pushed into your muscles, right? So this is now your body being in a stress state. So only when those processes go into retreat does your default parasympathetic branch or that thrive state come back into control, right? So
Mhm.
then there's the second biological system that's activated when you're in a stress state. This one is a mouthful. It's called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And
Wow.
you can kind of think about this HPA axis kind of like a stress broadcast service, if you will, right? So stress, whether it's physical or emotional, a lot of people don't talk about emotional stress as much. It's
Mhm.
detected by a part of your brain called the hypothalamus. So when it detects stress, your hypothalamus, it releases a hormone that sends a stress signal to another part of your brain called the pituitary gland. I know this is a lot here, but I want you to understand what's going on in your body.
Mhm.
But this in turn releases a hormone to send the signal all the way down to your adrenal glands, which help you to cope with stress. And then they release a hormone called cortisol. So everybody's heard of cortisol,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I wanted to give you the full picture because everybody talks about cortisol, but they don't really understand all the things that happen before cortisol kind of
Ah,
kicks in,
okay.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So cortisol is that primary stress hormone that it suppresses your digestive system. We talked about that earlier. Also suppresses your immune system and it places your body in that fight or flight mode. So this makes you more susceptible to colds and the flu, and it can also increase your blood sugar levels as well. And this is why we
Wow.
see a correlation between stress and diabetes,
Wow.
right?
Oh
And
God.
this places your body, yeah, it places your body in a really like alarmed, dangerous state. And think about it, your body's not meant to be in this alarmed state all the time, right?
Yeah.
And there's some studies that also show that high cortisol levels can also increase your appetite. I know it definitely does for me. And it can also make you store more abdominal fat as well. And then there's the inflammation piece because increased cortisol levels, it leads to chronic inflammation in your body. And chronic inflammation is at the root of most, if not all, diseases. So stress really does play a big part in your overall health. It leads to disease and all these different things. And it just has detrimental effects on your health. So it can show up in ways like if it goes unchecked for a long period of time, it can show up in ways like diabetes, I mentioned earlier, heart disease, which is the number one killer in North America, high blood pressure, ulcers, depressions, early aging, obesity, cancer, and the list goes on and on.
Oh my God. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful. Honestly, that was a mouthful, but honestly, it's good to hear this because I've also
Yeah.
had issues dealing with stress. Like I think now I've implemented going for walks. That's one of my I've been going for walks for the past couple of I guess months. And I that's my routine, but I'm sure there's other things to do. But just hearing you say all that stuff, it really does scare me. It scared me, but
Good. I
in a
hope
good
it
way.
does.
Well, really, okay, it scared me in a good way because it's like we know that stress is bad for us, right? And that's why I'm so
Hmm.
glad we're doing the show.
Hmm.
That's why I'm so glad that you're here because we know it's bad, but you actually pinpointed like all the diseases that can that stress can contribute to. Do you know what I mean? So it was kind of
Yeah.
good that you actually pointed it out for myself and the audience, so we
Yeah.
can get them.
Yeah.
What are ways that we can deal with stress then? What are some key things we can do on a daily basis?
Yeah, Michelle, that's a great question. I always, start with perception. And I'm a huge, I don't know, advocate about the whole theme around perception. So your first thing really is to change your perception of stress. And for me personally, stress actually became my biggest asset rather than something that I allowed to cripple me. And it could be for many other people too, if they just learn to lean into it. Because I see stress as an invitation or even a message that shows you where you might need to redesign certain areas of your life, where you might need to establish some really clear and strong boundaries, right? So, for example, I mentioned earlier, I was in the corporate world. I was in the corporate world for many, many years, like 13, 14 years. And I started my nutrition practice while I was still in the corporate world. And one day when I was, I had this boss and she just never seemed to be satisfied with my work. Although everybody else on my team was, she just never seemed to be satisfied. And one day afterwards, she provided me with some really bad criticism. And, rather than getting like stressed and anxious, which is what I always did, I just simply just pause and I just ask myself in the moment, okay, what is it that I can learn from this moment? Like, what is the situation trying to tell me here? Because I was reaching my breaking point. And in that moment, I actually started to feel gratitude because I realized that my boss had given me yet another reason to leave the corporate world, which ultimately led to me doing what I'm doing now for a living, which I absolutely love. So people would just do themselves an enormous favor if they just take control of how you're framing your life and how you're framing stress and make stress work for you rather than against you. So always see stress as some sort of invitation as to where you need to redesign some area of your life. And as a speaker, like one of my most popular workshops is how to turn stress into your superpower. And the whole idea of it is this: nobody is free of stress, not even me as a stress management expert, but you can master the way that you react to it and rise above it so that it no longer has this immense sense of control over you.
Oh my God, that's so good. It's true. Stress kind of does uh indicate or gives you an idea of you do need to reframe this part of your life or whatever. That is just so that's a gem. That was a gem.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
so
it's
I
true.
really felt that one. I really, really did. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. But like for me personally, like I'm a people pleaser, and this is something I'm still trying to work on. Like I say yes to a lot of things, even when I should say no. And
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast one time, and there's this guy. His name is Dean Graziosi. I don't know if you've heard of him before. He's
Mm.
like in the personal development space. But he
Okay.
said something along the lines, I'm going to completely butcher this. He says something along the lines of it's easier, like when it comes to like establishing boundaries, he says it's easier to give a quick no than it is to unwind a really hesitant yes.
Wow.
Like, think about how many times you've said yes to something when you should have said no to it. And now you
Yeah.
have to try to backtrack and figure out how you're going to get out of this. And you're planning all the different scenarios in your mind, what that phone call is going to look like, what it's going to mean if you say no, when you should have just said no to begin with.
Oh my God.
Right.
Yeah.
So it really establishing boundaries is so key for me. And I heard a therapist say this once. She said, boundaries are like guardrails in the road. They're there to protect everyone.
Mm. It's
So if
true.
you're a people pleaser, think about it that way. Like you're not just protecting yourself, you're also protecting those around you because now maybe you can be more present for those around you, whether it's a spouse, whether it's your kids, whether it's, an aging parent that you're taking care of, right? So in terms of like some additional ways to manage stress other than boundaries, of course, I'm going to say diet because I'm a nutritionist.
Mm.
So I would say, incorporating some stress busting nutrients. Because here's the thing, Michelle, there's certain nutrients that get depleted in your body during times of stress. And these days we often tend to treat, illness or diseases with prescription or even like weight loss now with prescription drugs or risky surgeries. And all of this before we even stop to consider much less invasive forms of healing, like what we put on our plate. So there's certain nutrients that I use with my clients to help them to alleviate stress. There's a whole bunch of them, but for the sake of time, I'll just touch on three real quick.
Okay, great.
So the first one are B vitamins. So when you're stressed, it completely burns out the B vitamins in your body. And vitamin B6 in particular, it helps you to manufacture the neurotransmitter serotonin. And that's the neurotransmitter that, helps your body's ability to cope with depression, stress, and anxiety, right? Serotonin is the one that makes you feel good,
Yeah.
right? So sweet potatoes, for example, which is one of my favorite foods, they're really a great source of B vitamins. And they're also like a comfort food that really helps to feed our soul. In addition to B6, you're also going to get vitamin C as well and calcium from sweet potatoes. And I wasn't going to touch on this, but I'll touch on this real quick because I think this is interesting. When you're stressed out, try to reach for grounding foods. So, grounding foods are foods that are grown close to the earth. And in Ayurvedic medicine, which is one of the world's oldest whole body healing systems, it tells us that when we eat those grounding foods, those foods that are grown close to the ground, it actually carries that grounding energy and it passes it on to you, right? So like, sweet potatoes, like beets, anything grown close to the ground, right? I love beets. They're just like, I love that earthy kind of flavor. Didn't always love them, but
Same here. I didn't love them as a kid. I love them now. I do like them now too.
yeah, I like them now too. There's actually a really good recipe on my website for this beet latte. And it's a really popular YouTube video of mine as well. It's like it's so delicious and it's so pretty to look at and just so pretty to drink. I eat with my
Beet
eyes too.
latte. Beet latte?
A beet latte, yeah. So you
I'm
just roast
definitely
some
gonna check that out.
beets. Yeah, roast some beets, put it in a blender. So, roast the beets, let them cool, peel them, pop them in a blender, throw in some coconut milk, a little bit of ginger, maybe a little bit of cinnamon, like just a pinch of like sea salt. Can't remember what else is in there, but just blend it all up. And then you just throw it in a saucepan, heat it up on the stove. And it is so pretty when you pour it in your mug. It's like this nice, vibrant, like pink drink. And it is so good for you. It tastes delicious. It's so good.
I'm
I
gonna
love
try
it.
that. I'm gonna try that. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So there's B vitamins and then there's iron. So iron is one of the most important nutrients for your body. And iron deficiency, it's a common worldwide problem. And stress can really lower levels of iron in your body, specifically in women.
Mm.
So iron's really important because you need it to carry oxygen carrying red blood cells. So it's no surprise that one of the main symptoms of deficiency is fatigue, right? So
Mm.
iron-rich foods include things like spinach, broccoli, lentils, quinoa, and pumpkin seeds. And pumpkin seeds actually are a source of another great stress-busting mineral called magnesium.
Oh,
So you kind of
great.
get like a two-for-one deal with those.
Oh, that's so awesome. Oh my God, I'm so excited to hear this. I know you're speaking, but I'm just kind of like I'm thinking about my journey because I'm not sure because I did have fibroids and I had surgery.
Oh,
I had it 7 months ago, but
okay.
my fibroids were really big. They were massive.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. So what you're saying to me is kind of speaking really to me because you're talking about the iron deficiency, and I was iron deficient because there was no hemoglobin. Like I was,
Right.
yeah. So, um, and I'm eating all the stuff you're saying, like the quinoa. Like, I feel fantastic now. Don't I mean like first.
Good. That was my next question. Like, yeah,
Oh
how are
yeah, I
you
feel
doing now?
fantastic.
Okay.
I see my gynecologist like all the time, and so I do eat pumpkin seeds, sweet potato, and I love quinoa. I just had quinoa right before this, so
Good.
I eat all that. But so it's so cool to hear this. So now I'm seeing the connection. Like this is really an eye opener for myself because I was stressed last year, which I feel like kind of propelled my fibroids. I have no medical science to say that, but I knew my fibroids were massive, and it was due to like being a Black woman and whatever. I knew that was there, but it got really big. Even in the last few months, it grew in 5 months, 5 inches in like a couple
Okay.
months. 5 inches,
Oh my
5 inches.
goodness.
So yeah, I was depleted in everything. Didn't realize that. I just kind of kept pushing myself, pushing myself, pushing myself. Now I'm not gonna ever do something like that again.
No,
It
yeah,
was
same. I hear
because you
you,
broke it
Michelle.
down. You broke it
Yeah.
down about what you need for your body. And it was really like you're talking, but it's in my head. I'm like, holy crap. That was why I was just feeling like looked and felt horrible because all this stuff was completely depleted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. People underestimate diet, and a lot of
Yeah.
people just want to just pop a pill and just,
Yeah.
have everything magically go away. And it's
Uh-huh.
not that simple because, of course, there's going to be side effects to these drugs, and then you're going to need another drug to, help to counteract those side effects, right?
Yeah. So I want to ask, do you think life is more stressful now than it was 20 years ago? Because now we're dealing with, like, say, the pandemic and post-pandemic. We're dealing with the high cost of living. Is it harder, or is it just our perception of it?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be very honest with you. Again, I think if people would just change their perception of their life, like, maybe it would be easier for them to make those changes, or they can see where they need to actually make those changes in their life. But the World Health Organization, they called stress the health epidemic of the 21st century. And this was before the pandemic, right?
Wow.
So there's just a lot going on in the world today, which has a lot of people feeling stressed and anxious. And we're getting hit with external stressors everywhere now, and I feel even more so now than before. We're working 50 plus hours a week. Yes, some of us are working from home now or doing hybrid, but you're probably putting in more hours now doing a hybrid model or working from home than you were maybe even when you were in the office, right?
Yeah.
We have more family responsibilities. A lot of people my age, they're caring for aging parents, right? My mom during the pandemic, like, I don't want to say she didn't do too well during the pandemic, but I definitely, noticed like an increase in aging with my mom during the pandemic, right? So a
Oh yeah.
lot of people are caring for aging parents now and trying to figure that out. There's financial woes that we have, period, but now there's financial woes in conjunction with dealing with aging parents, right?
Yeah.
There's just so many, we're getting all these different external stresses from so many different places, and we're compounding that with unhealthy food choices, unhealthy lifestyle choices, and our bodies are just not designed to be in this constant state of stress, but yet this is what most people experience each and every day. So the result is an epidemic of stress and increased risk of chronic diseases, like anything from type 2 diabetes to cardiovascular disease, cancer, depression, Alzheimer's, dementia. And in fact, 80% of all doctors' visits are thought to be due to or related to stress.
Wow. I mean, I believe you. I mean, I totally like everything you're saying, like makes so much sense because I mean, like you're talking about the aging parents, you're talking about like everything. It's like everyone in my age group and my friend group was dealing with that as well. So we're all kind of like, how do we deal with stress? How do we
Yeah,
what do we do? You know what I mean? You know what I
yeah,
mean? Diet
absolutely.
diet is key. Like I do believe what we put in our body will fuel us, you know what I mean, and help us. So I'm glad that you said that. So if not food, well, what else can you suggest to for stress management?
Yeah, I would say, like, check in with yourself. And this is something that a lot of people underestimate. Like, we're so busy, like just going through the day. We're just checking the boxes, just checking thing off, one thing after the next. And we're not really spending any time with ourselves. We're not checking in with ourselves just to ask ourselves a simple question like, how am I doing? Am I okay? Right. So when I'm feeling stressed in the moment, that's what I do. I stop and I'm like, okay, Trudy, how are you feeling right now? Just put some words to it. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling irritated. I'm feeling, pissed off, whatever it is. Right. And okay, well, what's one thing I can do to change my state like right now? Okay, well, maybe I can watch something funny on YouTube. I don't know if I can say this, but I watch this thing on YouTube. It's called Chocolate Sunday. It's like the stand-up routine, And like there's all these like different stand-up comics. Like you can just like watch like a quick 5 minute stand-up comedy routine, right? They're so funny, so good. Whoever you like, whether it's Dave Chappelle, it could be Chris Rock, it could be Jerry Seinfeld, whoever you like, put it on for 5 minutes and just have like a quick laugh, right?
Yeah.
Going out for a walk. You mentioned that earlier. I love doing that. I love just going for a walk. Sometimes I just want to walk in silence. Sometimes I might want to listen to a podcast. Sometimes I might put on a sermon, right? Having a wind down routine at the end of the day. This is super important because a lot of us were on our phones or we're on our computers right until we hit our head on the pillow. When your body and your brain kind of needs that buffer time because your brain needs that opportunity to produce melatonin that helps you to fall asleep, right? So my wind down routine at the end of the day is I turn all the lights down low. I have an essential oil diffuser. I put in my essential oils in there. I have like a Spotify, like, stress relief podcast or not podcast, a playlist that I put on. And I might just read like a fiction book for like 5 minutes, right? So that's kind of like my wind down routine. And when I do that, that sends a signal now to my brain that, hey, it is the end of the day. We are winding down. It is time to go to bed. Because if you don't do that, and if you're working right up until your head hits the pillow, or if you're on your phone right up until your head hits the pillow, if you're watching news right before you go to bed, which is the worst thing you can do, now you have all these thoughts going on in your brain over and over again. You're tossing and turning and you can't sleep, right? So your brain really, really does need that pause and that wind down to help you to activate sleep. And then scheduling stress, like stress management on your calendar. This is something that I've started doing during the pandemic because right as the pandemic was starting, I was feeling myself approaching burnout. So I just put everything on pause in my business. And it was really hard for me to do as a control freak and as a workaholic. But I was like, Trudy, if you don't do this now, like who knows where this is going to go. And that's the thing, like burnout, it's almost like dominoes falling, like one after the other. And you kind of have to start, you have to kind of have to get to it from when that first domino starts to fall, right? So that you don't get into this, this chronic burnout state. So I always schedule some sort of stress management activity on my calendar. Like I do it every Saturday. So every Saturday I do something that's, relieves my stress, and every single day. And every single day could just be that 5 minutes that I mentioned earlier, where you just watch something funny on YouTube. It could be like a 10-minute walk. It could be, calling a friend that always makes you laugh, whoever that is, right? But just like if you're working in the corporate world and you schedule a meeting on your calendar, you schedule a meeting on your calendar because you want everybody to show up there at the same time, right? You have to think about self-care and managing stress in the same way, because if it's not on the calendar, nobody's showing up in the meeting room, right? So if you're not having it on your calendar, you're probably less likely to give yourself the self-care that your body needs and that your brain needs to do those stress management techniques that's going to help you to alleviate stress and to avoid burnout. So I'm a huge proponent of putting it in my calendar. Even my meal prep is in my calendar.
Now I'm actually have to put it in my calendar because I
Yeah.
do it. And it's been the hardest thing for me to do is the self-care, like taking the 5 minutes, whatever. But the one thing I try to do right now for stress management is dance. Listen to music and just dance for 5 minutes.
Oh, I love
That
that.
that's my new thing because it's just I don't know, it just relieves a lot of stress. It feels really good. Like if I'm not walking, then I want to take like a 5 minute or a 10 minute dance break. And I call
Mhm.
it dance therapy. That's what I call it.
Ooh.
So that's my like when I want to feel good. But when I want to feel good, I just put on some music, dance in my room. Literally just that's what I do.
And what are you dancing to?
Afro pop. Afro,
Oh, okay. I love it. I love it.
Afro
I
pop
love
is
it.
like the best. Actually, no, I have different moods. I'm not gonna lie. It could be like 90s dance music. It could be
Mhm.
like hip hop. It could be like R&B. But Afro pop and soca is something that it feels good. It just feels really good in my soul. So that's what
Mhm.
I do. I'm killing the playlist that I have. It's usually Afro pop. Yes, I
I
love it.
love that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I like combining both. So when I do my meal prep, I like listening to like 90s R&B and hip hop. So
yeah,
I'll listen to that as I'm doing my meal prep because it just makes it more fun. And I'm actually dancing as I'm like doing the meal prep, right?
yeah.
I always try to make things that aren't enjoyable somehow. Like, what's one thing I can do to just make this non-enjoyable task just a little bit more enjoyable, right?
Yeah. Can you tell that I enjoyed the conversation about music as a stress reliever? I totally did. But before I ended the interview, Trudy wanted to add one more thing about the correlation between food and stress.
So I want to talk about like stress and emotional eating just really quick, and this
Oh,
will
yeah, of
lead
course.
into like an
Oh,
offer I
gosh,
have.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when we're stressed, like most people tend to self-soothe stress with food, right? And in fact, 75% of overeating is actually due to emotions. But The problem is a lot of the foods that people are turning to manage stress are actually formulated to keep you hooked. And these foods are actually called ultra processed foods. They're getting a lot of buzz now in the media, and they attack the very part of your brain that's responsible for regulating mood and stress, which makes your problem worse in the long term while increasing your risk of serious illness. So, if you look at it this way, when you eat those foods, it's almost like just putting a band aid on it. You're not actually healing the problem, right? So, knowing this is why I created my Swap It, Don't Stop It challenge. And in the challenge, you'll learn how to stop overeating, crush food cravings, and lose weight without saying goodbye to your favorite foods. So, my mom is Jamaican. So, one thing I don't believe in is sacrificing flavor when it comes to eating healthy.
Mhm.
So, I always try to find healthier versions for different meals. So, like cookies, for example, like I always make healthier versions of cookies that actually still taste good. Cakes. Like I have a salted caramel cake that I make with chickpea flour. It's absolutely delicious, right? So during the challenge, you're going to learn how healthy food swaps are really that like hands down the most effective way to lose weight, to regain energy, and also to improve your mood. But you're not just learning how to swap ingredients, you're also learning how to swap the narrative, right? By tapping into really powerful mindset shifts that will empower you to make lasting changes and see real results. So it's a 5-day self-paced online challenge. And when you join, you'll receive instant access.
Okay, great. So do you have the recipes on you have recipes on your website as well, though? No?
Yeah, yeah. If you go on my website, you'll see like recipes for these. I have these chickpea flour chocolate chip cookies. I have a salted caramel chickpea cake. I have like these brownies, like these cherry chocolate brownies. So good. There's this. I have a sweet tooth, so I always have to try to find ways to make healthier versions of my favorite foods. So there's a lot of those recipes on my website. And during the challenge, I teach you how to actually, make healthier food swaps for some of your favorite unhealthy foods. So you can join by going to trudyestone.com/swap hyphen challenge.
Perfect. I'm gonna check it out because I was at your website. I saw frittata, and I love frittatas. So I
Oh,
was
yeah, me
curious.
too.
I want to try that one. I want to try that recipe. I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, yeah. Let me know.
Well, I just want to say thank you for spending this afternoon with us, letting us know about how to manage our stress because there's a lot going on in this world, and we do need,
There
and
is.
there's always going to be stress. So we just need to know how to cope with it or deal with it. So,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
if you want to leave the audience with your contact information.
Yeah, you can find me on social media. I'm Trudy E. Stone on Instagram, Trudy E. Stone on Facebook, and on YouTube, you can find me at Food Swap Foodie.
Thanks for joining me for the latest episode of Words with Michelle, the podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd love for you to like and subscribe and give a review on Spotify. Just a reminder, if you have any questions or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email me at michelle@wordsofmichelle.com. You can also email me if you have any questions about how to sponsor the show or sponsor an episode. Thanks for listening. Until next time, bye.